Hello, I'm Calvin Nobles, and today I will be providing a presentation on addressing the undereducation of human factors in cybersecurity. Here are some of the agenda items we will discuss within this brief presentation: human factors, targeting humans, human performance issues, human-centered cybersecurity, mitigating initiatives, and the business value of human factors. In all of my presentations, I like to start with a very simple definition of what is human factors. And basically, as we can see on the slide here, it's a scientific approach to improving system designs to optimize human behavior and performance while engaging with information security systems, technologies, policies, and procedures. Whatever infrastructure you're working in, essentially it is how to improve that system in which employees are working to optimize human behavior and human performance. The other factors that we have to take into account is that humans are our first and last line of defense. We can never, up to this point, remove the humans from our cybersecurity programs and our cybersecurity operations. Even with artificial intelligence, machine learning, and automation, the human element is critically involved and intricately tied to everything that we do. So it's very difficult to remove the human element. Maybe in the future we'll reach that point, but as of today, we're not there. The other thing to take into account is that organizations are building very complex ecosystems, and these systems are cognitively more demanding of the employees and the people that are operating and leveraging these systems for whatever task or function that they're responsible for, and we're not accounting for that. And the other thing we have to take into account is that the adversary has a vote, and some of their attacks and some of their social engineering schemes are very sophisticated, and they're very difficult for employees to determine, um, the trueness of these attacks. And so, again, this is another element that organizations have to take into account regarding the human factor. I always like to start off my presentations off with with a quote, and this is from probably one of that many of you know, Kevin Mitnick, famous social engineering slash hacker himself, now CEO of a very well-known company within the United States. And essentially, here Kevin say that we spend a lot of money, millions of dollars, on technology, devices, networks, network segmentation, defense in depth, and guess what? It doesn't work. The reason it doesn't work is because people are the weakest link in our security chain, and they're certainly being targeted by cyber criminals today. In other words, people are Achilles heels of cybersecurity. It's very difficult to maneuver when you have a ruptured or you have an ailment with your Achilles heel. And so that's what we are today in cybersecurity. We're maneuvering, but we're not optimized. And we realize that humans, our employees, are the very attack vector into our organizations, but we really haven't grasped how to deal with that other than buying more technologies to prevent it or tighten up and leveraging more stringent controls to try to manipulate the behavior of our employees. And today, both of those initiatives are not working very well. So a recent study conducted by the Panama Institute, consisting of 612 chief information security officers and information security professionals, determined 70% of those individuals determined that human factors is a major concern. But the question we have to ask is why? And then the second question we have to ask is, what are we doing about it to address it? Gone are the days of just sticking our heads in the ground and the sand or whatever we want to stick it in and just ignoring the human factor. Simply because 80 to 90% of all cybersecurity incidents are due to human error. And that is further compounded by every 39 seconds, there's a successful cyber attack. I think that number is probably a lot less than that. I think that it's probably down to probably around 15 to 20 seconds because we have so many cyber attacks and incidents that are not reported. And then it's also compounded by the fact that cyber criminals are creating more than 230,000 different malware variants daily to trick our employees to clicking on those links or clicking on those attachments. And we know that through the malware, they're able to gain access by stealing our employees' credentials. So we have to ask ourselves, why? Why is this able to become so prevalent? Why are they able to be so successful? And one of the reasons is because there's a human factors knowledge gap. I recently conducted a study with some very senior security and technology executives. And not one of them was able to satisfactorily explain what human factors really is. They gave me a lot of symptoms of human factors, such as people make mistakes. They leave their laptops in their cars. Those laptops are then stolen. They use weak passwords. They write down their passwords. They put them in their desk drawers. They give me every symptom that you can potentially think of, but they can't give me the scientific definition. We have to understand that human factors is a scientific discipline, and we must leverage that discipline regarding human factors. Today, we are not leveraging that human factors as a scientific discipline, and that's the problem. Human factors is more than the behavior, what people are doing, or the behavior we're able to observe. Human factors is about redesigning the system to optimize human performance and behavior. So if we have security executives who don't understand human factors, that's a major problem. Most executives undervalue human factors as a scientific discipline. We see this over and over and over again. And the reason they undervalue it is because they don't understand it. If executives who's responsible for running these large programs and these large directors do not understand human factors, we can't expect the organization to grasp and implement human factors initiatives. So we must address this knowledge gap. There's a lack of human factors education at every level, whether it's at the associate's degree level, whether it's at the bachelor's, whether it's at the master's, whether it's at the PhD level. We need, regarding cybersecurity, we need to implement human factors in every discipline, whether it's computer science, whether it's computer engineering, whether it's information security, whether it's cybersecurity, whatever it may be, we need to grasp human factors. It's too important and too critical to what we do today not to have it integrated into our formal education systems. And I'm also talking about search too. Let's not leave out search. Search needs to start addressing the human factors. And then we also need to realize there's a paucity of empirical studies on human factors in cybersecurity. And the reason it is because it's hard. Because it's hard doesn't mean we shouldn't do it. And we have strayed away from doing it. Now, as researchers and practitioners, we need to roll up our sleeves and be more demanding and work with academia, work with our researchers, and work with industry to make sure we're working together to address these empirical studies so we can understand human behavior, and then we can start to leverage it as a tool in our repertoire to make organizations more resilient. And how do we bridge that gap in human factors? First, there needs to be inclusion of human factors practitioners in cybersecurity. As of today, very rarely do you see a human factors practitioner in cybersecurity. We need to make the presence of human factors integrated into cyber operations the norm. We need to have an effective balance of processes, technologies, and people. Right now, we see a healthy appetite of processes where organizations are implementing more security measures, more countermeasures, and more security controls, and a healthy appetite of technologies. But what we're not seeing a lot of focus on the people. And the reason we're not seeing a lot of focus on the people is because, again, it's very difficult. We really don't understand human behavior in cybersecurity. We do have some studies out there from the cyber psychology realm, but we don't have it from a mainstream aspect yet. And one of the reasons being is because a lot of organizations do not give you access to their people to conduct these kinds of studies. However, the organizations can work with academia and researchers to conduct the studies on their people and keep that information just solely for that organization. Don't release it to the public. We also need to see an increased comprehension of security behavior. Right now, we don't, and it's beginning to bother us because cyber criminals understand security behavior a lot more than we do, hence the type of attacks they're using. These attacks, some of them are not overly sophisticated, even though some of them are. And the reason they're able to go from non-sophistication to a very highly sophisticated attack is because they understand the human behavior domain a lot more than the organization and the security teams themselves. And we also need to start thinking about cognitive security. We see too many attacks that's dealing with the cognitive incorporation of the people, meaning the people have to click on something or do something to give the cyber criminals access. So we need to really focus on and start having more discussions and more training around the cognitive security attacks. Because today we live in a world where we are truly hacking the human. Why? Because it's the easiest vector into an organization. The cognitive security is not as solidified. We need to do some work to help employees understand that they are providing the gateway into our organizations by trying to help, and especially understand that most messages coming from cyber criminals are going to deal with some type of time pressure, meaning it's something that needs to be done right away, pressuring the employees to make a decision. And in some cases, it's the wrong decision that our employees are tricked into making. Behavioral science. We don't really understand behavioral science to the degree. This needs to become the norm. As of today, we struggle with that. And so since we struggle with it, we don't even include it in our cybersecurity practices or procedures. And we need to. Again, this can be done by including the right people with the right training into your organization. Organically, you cannot use cybersecurity professionals to try to address hacking the humans. Why? They haven't been trained in it. You need people who have been trained, who bring unique skill sets to the table that can help you address the high friction point with hacking the humans. So this is how most of us look on a daily basis. We're outside of the problem looking in. And this is because we're not included in cybersecurity operations. It's time for psychologists, human factors practitioners, behavior analysts, cognitive scientists, and technologists to work together to be included in this into our cybersecurity operations so we can design smarter systems. Remember, that is the premises of human factors, is a systematic approach to improving the system design in which people are actually working. And that's why we need to partner with all these different entities here. Is each one of them bring a unique perspective that needs to be worked together holistically in a unified manner to help us improve what we're trying to accomplish in understanding human behavior and preventing cognitive security attacks from taking such high demand and high toll on our organizations. The other thing I would like to add on this slide here is we see an influx of user experience researchers and designers. They're in high demand right now. And because they're in high demand, that's a good thing. However, what I'm asking organizations to do, instead of taking an external look or looking at it from a customer's perspective or just looking at it from an interface perspective, look at it from a user experience, from the employee experience aspect of it. That way, you can really get a firmer grasp on what your high friction areas are, and then you can start working towards a point of mitigating them rather than allowing them things to exist and continue till they reach a point to where a cognitive security attack is successful. Some other problems we have with human performance in cybersecurity, we have a problem with stress. We have a problem with being distracted. Without a doubt, fatigue is a problem, and so is burnout. The one thing that I would like to point out here is that these four elements, these four performance issues are sustained. They've been sustained before COVID-19. COVID-19 just highlighted them even more because they was compounded by many other factors, such as working remote, people no longer being able to leverage team members and teamwork as readily as available as they were able to do it in the past. So now we got people working at home with their children, with parents, people who never worked remote before. We got to remember, we got a very large demographic workforce. And so some people are very comfortable with working from home in a digital environment. Some people are not. And so again, when people are not happy, they're not used to working in that environment, it could drive to stress, it could drive up their fatigue, and eventually lead to burnout if we don't address it correctly. Right now, we're not addressing it correctly. In fact, most managers are not trained in anti-fatigue management or fatigue management. So these problems are going to fester for a while. They're beginning to take their toll now. We're beginning to see taking their toll on a lot of our senior cybersecurity leaders, such as our chief information security officer, and their short tenure on the job. That burnout rate there is indicative of the demand on the job. What can we do differently to take some of the stress and demand off of the chief information security officer so we don't have them being fatigued and burnt out? And just speaking of fatigue, here are a list of different types of fatigue. And this list is it's not all inclusive. There's some things I didn't list on here, but I just wanted to give you a picture when we talk about fatigue. What are some of the things that are causing fatigue, and what type of fatigue are we looking at? A lot of these things are self-induced when it comes to an organization because we're not doing them smartly. We're not having human factors engineer look at what happens when we integrate these changes and some of the technologies into our cybersecurity operation, and it's leading to fatigue and other things that negatively impact human factors. So, what can we do about mitigating some of the issues we have in cybersecurity regarding human factors? First of all, let's not recreate the wheel. Let's take a look at some other socio-technical environments that have done very well in integrating human factors. Aviation, Navy submarine operations, industrial safety, medicine, nuclear energy, and space exploration. Now, I would tell you from an operational side, these industries have done very well at grasping human factors and incorporating them into their environment, reducing human error, reducing mistakes through optimizing system design. Now, the question that I have is, if medicine has done this from a patient risk factor, why isn't the medical community doing this also, the healthcare community doing this also from a cybersecurity aspect? There's a disconnect that's indicative of silos. And so, again, we could talk about that on all day, but we're going to continue here. But this is just to highlight some industries that are doing human factors. They're doing it very well. And these are domains that are very similar to cyber domains, and the aspect that they are very socio-technically involved, meaning they got a huge social aspect to them. They got an enormous technical aspect to them, but you're talking about systems within the systems. And so we sometimes in cybersecurity don't think of it from that aspect. We think that the cybersecurity program is one big program. It's not. It's many smaller entities and initiatives going on within that program to make that program what it is today. And so I recommend that organizations develop a human factors platform. Why? A human factors platform can be an entity where it's executive led to where it can address high friction areas for the organization dealing with cybersecurity, such as fatigue, such as under training, such as under resourcing, such as getting to the root causes of why we having such high number of data breaches. Do we understand the errors and mistakes that are taking place, and what do we need to do to prevent those things? We don't really understand errors in cybersecurity. We don't really apply an error taxonomy. We should. One researcher by the name of James Reason started addressing human error in many different sectors back as early as 1990s. In some cases, a few decades before that. But I would tell you, we don't have to reinvent the wheel. We can leverage existing research to give us a better understanding of human error and why things are happening. When we start to understand human error and why they're happening, understand those foundational causes, that will give us a better opportunity to understand human behavior and what's leading up to the human errors and mistakes. And here's some other human factors initiatives. First of all, we have to recognize that there's a gap. When we recognize that there's a gap, then that can drive to partnering with human factors engineers, other psychology-based professionals to help reduce the high friction areas. Again, establish a human factors platform. Conduct human factors risk assessment. Most risk assessments done today do not include human-based risk factors. And so that's why we continue to see performance issues in cybersecurity, such as fatigue, burnout, distractions, and high levels of stress, because nobody's accounting for the human factor risk assessment. Partner with human factor specialists. If you don't have the means and the resources to hire them full-time to integrate them into your operations, partner with them, use them as a third-party partner or as a contractor, and go from there. I alluded to this earlier. Instead of having your UX design team look solely external to the organization, have them to take their same practices, look internally to the organization to see what they can gain from doing assessments on employee experiences when it comes to cybersecurity. And we conduct surveys to determine stress, fatigue, and burnout levels. This is important. This is something that you can do today that most organizations are not doing. And just to highlight how encumbersome human factors in cybersecurity really can be, this slide highlights many of the different moving entities and moving domains that we must grasp. And this is what makes integrating human factors into cybersecurity so important. But in order for us to address this, we really need to look at it and address it from the educational aspect as well. So, what do we need to do to grasp this and learn and bring all these entities to bear when we're talking about building a very robust cybersecurity program? We must first start with the education piece. Like I said, like I alluded to, there is a under education of human factors in cybersecurity. How did it get there? Because we do not have a high appreciation for it. A lot of people look at human factors engineers as people that's going to come in and delay projects. Well, in most cases, the literature tells us that if you do not incorporate human factors initiatives at the beginning of your projects in the concept phase, you will pay more to initiate those concepts at the end or when throughout building that project. So it's smart to grasp and to build those human factors initiatives early on into the process during the conceptual phase rather than to do it later. The business value is here. As you can see from the slide here, you know, what's the business value? Fewer errors, reduced labor costs, fewer lost work days, increased satisfaction, trust, and loyalty, higher productivity and work quality, healthier employees, increased security awareness, and reduced security costs. This list of factors here highlight, without a doubt, that human factors is of great business value to organizations. The hardest part is convincing the decision makers that human factors need to be a part of their organization. And because we have an undereducation of human factors in cybersecurity, that argument is a hard argument to have in today's environment. The reason it's so hard to have is because we're talking to senior executives who don't understand it. There needs to be executive level education for for those senior decision makers, and then that human factors education in cybersecurity need to cascade with different programs and different training venues throughout the different hierarchy of the organization. Because right now, maybe one or two people within an organization truly understand it. In some cases, no one in the organization understands, and that's okay because with the undereducation of human factors in cybersecurity, the only way to get there is to start doing like we're doing now, having conversations about it, and let the senior decision maker make decisions on how they want to integrate human factors into their organization. But the true enormity of human factors in cybersecurity, we don't understand it. We really look at it like an iceberg. We see it's very small on top, but the enormity of it is below surface, and we do not understand it. Especially when it comes to human behavior, when it comes to why people do what they do, how to design systems that are built to the strengths of human, and how do we leverage all of those things to drive and build a better cybersecurity program. As of today, we really don't know. And these are the things that we really need to take from a research and concept phase into practice. And we need to do it very hastily because our organizations are getting bombarded with data breaches and ransomware attacks on a daily basis. So I believe this is one of our more serious issues in cybersecurity because there is an undereducation of human factors, and the more quickly we can address this issue, I believe the more resilient our organizations can be and prevent and avert these data breaches and ransomware attacks and cyber attacks from occurring. And with that, I'd like to close. Here's my information. If you have any questions, you can send me an email. You can find me on LinkedIn, and you can find me on Twitter. Thank you.